Here comes tomorrow, shining with promise, bright, brave new worlds for you to explore. If you don't like it, just hang around, cause tomorrow's tomorrow will reset the score. You can fight to turn the tide, try to rewrite, or just take flight, but you can't change the simple fact that it's where all your hopes are hiding. Here comes tomorrow.
Hello, homos, sapiens, and superior alike. My name is Josephine Riesman.
And my name is Becca Petunia.
We are two trans women here to talk about non-binary writer Grant Morrison's Turn of the Millennium comics run with the X-Men and what it tells us about finding joy in a world that hates and fears us. In other words, here comes tomorrow. So Becca, today we are diving into the actual comics. Last week we talked about Grant Morrison's pitch document proposal, the manifesto. But today we're going to talk about the fruits of that labor. Grant got the job, Grant did the job, and the first three issues are called a storyline called E is for Extinction, but it's really four issues. There's a fourth issue that's like an epilogue that's essentially just the last chapter of that story. So we're going to talk about the first four issues of the run today. E is for Extinction, and then this ostensible one-shot called Danger Rooms that really is the last chapter. And I want to start out by saying trigger warning, like for anybody listening. We'll put this in the show notes too, but this is a deeply upsetting story and was intended to be such in 2001. The trigger warning is for genocide. There is a very brutal genocide that happens in the second issue of this little stretch that we're going to talk about. And I'm curious, Becca, you read this comic long after it was published, and in the context of whatever context you were in, how did the second issue of this, where the genocide occurs, where the giant sentinels annihilate Genosha, how did you feel?
I felt like this shouldn't have happened from a story perspective. I remembered being very, I don't think that Grant Morrison should be playing around with these ideas. I think that this is kind of offensive. I was like, I'm not sure that we've set up the level of pathos necessary for this. I was worried that it felt like it was just shock factor, like I'm gonna do the most exciting thing. But I guess part of it is I was reading a lot of X-Men at the time, and so much of X-Men, when we think of both the good and the bad, is about the shock factor that
Sure.
I think it was tough for me when I was reading this all sort of mishmashed, different runs, picking up different runs, jumping around on Marvel Unlimited, following different characters. It was hard to see sort of the difference in how and why Grant Morrison did this. So I was just like, this is upsetting, but I'm not sure I felt like maybe it was upsetting in a way that offended me rather than upsetting in a way of authorial intent. And I understand that we can't use authorial intent when we're evaluating literature, but I just feel
Sure you
like
can. Come on. Who told you that? That's bullshit.
well,
I think that you have to take it in consideration at least. And the authorial intent was to offend. I mean, this not necessarily offend, but like to really shock, as you
yeah.
say.
I think I just wasn't prepared to deal with that emotion, so I just kind of pushed it aside as like, I bet Grant Morrison just did the wrong thing. But as I thought more about it, as I got older, because like I said, this comic really stuck with me, it really seemed much more meaningful. And not to get too far ahead, and Josie, I want to hear what your
No, go
thoughts
right
were.
ahead. Let's
But
jump all over the place here. I'm
yeah,
fine.
well, not to get too far ahead, reading this today in 2025 was rough.
It's a lot. It's a lot.
And I no longer feel that, Grant Morrison was fully doing this to titillate or something. I think there's a lot to discuss here. Josie, let's talk about you in 2001 though. And
Yeah.
let's talk about the fact, can I just briefly say for those of us in our audience who weren't weren't alive in 2001 or don't have, because God, can you believe people who weren't alive in 2001 could be
Might be listening to our voices right now. Terrifying to think about.
they could be 23 years old. They could be
Good God.
coworkers.
Okay, keep going. Yes.
I started teaching when I was like 23. But 2001 obviously is the same year as September 11th, the attacks on the World Trade Center. And
And the Pentagon, don't
and the
forget.
Pentagon, how could I forget? And I know I'm supposed to never forget, Josie. And
No, but like but go on. I'm not chastising you. It's just always interesting to me. Go on.
it would be a lie to say that Marvel Comics didn't reference or allude to that, but it would be a lie to say that these comics were referencing or alluding to that because the final issue of
E is for extinction.
E is for Extinction had a release date of August 22nd, 2001. It says here on Marvel Wiki.
I can tell you exactly where I was. When New X-Men number 116 came out, I was visiting my grandparents in Middletown, Rhode Island. Every August, we would go to Middletown, Rhode Island to spend some time with my grandparents. There was a comic book shop that no longer exists that was in Providence, Rhode Island called Million Year Picnic. I'm sorry, 2 Million Year Picnic. There's Million Year Picnic in Boston, in Cambridge, and then they had a satellite one in Providence called 2 Million Year Picnic. I picked up this issue the day it came out because let me tell you, if you were a teenager and you were reading superhero comics in 2001, there was nothing you were more excited about than seeing Grant Morrison take on the X-Men because the X-Men were still the most popular franchise despite sucking. And Grant Morrison had just done this incredible run on Justice League. So I was reading these things very avidly. And I remember sitting on the edge of the bed in the guest room, hunched over number 116, the conclusion of E is for Extinction. And it's hard to put into words because September 11th hadn't happened. And there's no way that I could have known, and this is a problem with a lot of people who talk about 9/11 and other catastrophic events, is you remember them and then say, I had a premonition that it was going to happen. But you can't prove that. More importantly, I read this comic in which the genocide happens and then where the aftermath is seen just less than a month before 9/11. And then when 9/11 happened, it's not that I predicted or Grant Morrison predicted 9/11. It's that this was put into a new context that I think is very dangerous. And you are right to find it offensive in 2001. Now, here's the thing. Grant didn't know 9/11 was going to happen. Grant didn't know how this story would be appropriated. But among fans, among comics heads, after 9/11, which was only like 3 weeks later, all we could think about was, my God, this is just like the destruction of Genosha, which it's not.
Right.
It's so not. It's like the opposite of that.
That's what I wanted to say real quick is like, when you say it's offensive to compare it, it's offensive to compare it because it is apples and oranges.
Apples and oranges.
There are
If
buildings destroyed, but
Yes.
the context and the implications are so different. And let me be clear. I understand E is for Extinction is fictional and 9/11 is not. I'm not here to be like,
No. But like 9/11 is also fictional within the context of the Marvel universe. And I think that's really interesting and important is that 9/11, when they handled that in the Marvel universe,
poorly.
was handled terribly. Whereas I actually think that the genocide in Genosha was handled there's parts of it that really hurt to read and that you can say are offensive, but it works more than their coverage of 9/11, which was purely patriotic bullshit.
Josie, do you remember the issue where Magneto
Of Spider-Man, where Magneto, Doctor Doom, and everybody cry at the site of Ground Zero?
Yeah, that
I believe that was written by J. Michael Straczynski.
okay. Because I was going to say, I read that long after 9/11 because I just had heard that it existed. And I was like, I kind of want to see this. And the idea that Doctor Doom, who in like Fantastic Four issue 12 or something, literally shoots a skyscraper into space would be like, this is too far. I'm like,
and he would shed a tear. That's the
I'm
best
like,
part.
pot kettle doom. Like
No, no, no. But like, here's the thing. Here's the thing.
but this isn't like that.
No, no, no. But let me finish my thought. Not, no, you didn't interrupt me, but I'm
Yeah.
just having more of the thought. Comics fans and fans of action movies and genre stuff like that, that's very explosive. We were in this very perverse way ready for 9/11. We had contexts ready to put this into. A lot of people who didn't read sci-fi or superhero comics really struggled to figure out how to like put an attack on America into the right frame. And Marvel completely failed, except that they kind of like they failed in their actual attempts to depict 9/11 in the universe. And then they failed in their attempts in the Ultimate Universe to try and handle it. And I really hated how the fans tried to make the destruction of Genosha like 9/11, because if anything, the closer analog to the X-Men in that political scenario is like fucking Al Qaeda, like a small group, a small ragtag group of paramilitary operatives try to take out a bigoted society. Like it's not, I'm not saying they are, but I'm just saying like at the time I remember thinking that's not a metaphor that makes like, it wasn't Grant's fault, but that's not what it is. So what is it? Like I can tell you that I sat there on the edge of the bed reading the issue where the X-Men go to the ruins of Genosha. And I just had this feeling like the world was terrible. I just had this awful realization that I hadn't even had while learning about the actual Holocaust while a kid in Jewish school and regular public school. It hit me in a different way, sometimes through the veil of fiction. Like you were saying, 9/11 and the destruction of Genosha are very different things because one's fictional and one isn't. But sometimes the veil of fiction is the only way we can see what's really happening. And I don't know. It feels like, it felt at the time like this is showing me what could happen. It wasn't a premonition, but it was showing me that like this is an extrapolation of how humans are, of how people are. And it was terrifying for me as a 15, 16-year-old.
Well, we were talking a little bit on before we started recording that, you know, the situation in Genosha truly and Grant Morrison very smartly sets it up this way is an issue of the great replacement theory, right?
Yeah.
That you hear about in white supremacist circles even today. And what's so interesting, you know, I got mixed feelings about the mutant metaphor, and we'll get into that.
We should get into that, but start with this.
Grant Morrison, you know, or rather, what we see today, we'll get to Grant Morrison in a second, but what we see today is, you know, white supremacist groups and other sort of fascist, you know, right-wing conservative groups use the great replacement theory, even if they're not necessarily using those words. But it basically is the idea that something, and I say something, not someone, because it's
right. It's always
not,
dehumanized.
It's always dehumanizing, and we'll get into that, but is coming to take the place of, typically in their eyes, you know, white Christian society.
Yeah, whoever deserves.
Which is always white people. It's always white. No one's ever.
I know a lot about Israel, and you got a lot of brown-skinned Sephardi Jews who think that that land belongs to them. So I'm just going to say it's not just whiteness.
You're right. And
it's not just whiteness. There are plenty of places.
There are countries,
where
you know,
people who are.
There was a genocide in Rwanda, you know,
yeah,
that wasn't
exactly.
white people.
All I'm trying to say, you're right most of the time. You are right most of the time, yes.
But the point is, you know, we see it a lot with immigrants, and you see this currently with, you know, all of these like concerns about birth rate, not birthright. That was a bit of a Freudian slip.
Yeah. But also birth rights to the land, like and birthright citizenship.
But birth rate, like, you know, America used to be 90% white, and now America is 70% white. And if it continues at this rate, one day we'll be 0% white, which is not how percentages work.
Not how percentages work. But that's how this comic opens, is with that.
Well, and what I was about to say, you know, hits even closer to home, you know, because I'm Jewish, which means I'm conditionally white.
Right. I'm Jewish as well. I would say I'm white. I enjoy some white privilege, but there's a whole lot of stuff that is a threat to me that is not a threat to the average white Christian.
But what I'm seeing a lot of
Yes.
in this in issue 114, and we'll get into the specific of it, but is a lot of the great replacement theory that goes around queerness that we see today. And we're
Oh,
seeing
go on.
so there's a huge, all of these things about like rapid onset gender
Oh,
dysphoria
social
and
contagion.
social contagion and
Yes.
the idea that well
Yes.
there's more trans people than there were years ago and you also even hear people meld the two by being like well trans people can't breed so if we don't
Right. So
stop
it's
trans people we're going to lose all the white people.
you're a genius. This is the best way to do at least this part of the metaphor, I think.
Because this is what's closest to my heart. And again, not like I don't care about genocide, because I do. I deeply care about genocide.
Well, I mean,
But
trans genocide is on the table. I mean,
but
that's
that's
the
what
point.
but what I'm saying is like, I mentioned in the first episode, like I'm involved in I literally am a member of the New York Civil Liberties Union and I
Yeah,
help
you do activism for
I
this
help
stuff.
run I help run the sort of LGBTQ division of that. And I don't want to speak for the New York Civil Liberties Union. I'm speaking for myself here. But like what I see in this comic is that idea that like in the past things everything just proceeded as normal. But now all of a sudden there's more and
Right.
more of this. And what also strikes me, so I mean, I'll get into the specifics here, but like in 114, Cassandra Nova, who's not identified as Cassandra Nova until
Yeah,
later,
yeah, until later.
but
Yeah.
but either way, the name means nothing until like because this is Cassandra Nova's first appearance. She's not like
Yes.
an old X-Men villain back at it,
Nope, nope.
but she's walking around with one of the Trask family,
Yeah.
and
As
Josie,
nephew of Bolivar Trask, the inventor of the Sentinels, those giant robots,
played by Peter
played by
Dinklage.
Peter Dinklage in the movie Days of Future Past, which is not a great movie, but Dinklage did a great job in it.
Yeah, and Cassandra is telling him like, look, I mean, she literally shows him Homo
She shows him a
sapiens.
virtual like representation on a VR helmet of this possible thing that happened. I mean, Grant's very clever. They have the Trask guy going, wait, it didn't happen like this. I read an article, which is there is a lot of debate about what happened, whatever it is, tens of thousands of years ago, when one kind of proto-human came out on top. Homo sapiens sapiens became the species that was dominant among proto-humans, and that's who we are. And there is a theory that there was a mass murder of the other proto-humans, that Homo sapiens sapiens decided to kill off everybody else. More recently, there's a lot more plausible theorizing. I'm told, I'm not an expert on this, but I'm told the more plausible recent theory is that they interbred and that we are actually the product of, a little genocide, of course, and xenophobia, but more often than not, it was more of a genetic interbreeding. But the point is, Cassie here, whose name we don't know, is presenting one very now popular among fascists interpretation of what happened with the human species, which was mass murder, and that the mass murder was necessary for the superior species to come out on top. This is
And
something, yeah, go
she's
ahead.
drawing parallels with it to what she is saying is happening now with mutants and humans.
Right, that Homo superior mutants will eventually, because they are more powerful and because they are the quote unquote next stage, will just wipe out Homo sapiens.
And what's interesting is she tells Trask this, and Trask is like, "Yeah, okay, so what?" And then she starts figuring out the ways to convince Trask that this is a
Yeah,
bad thing.
yeah.
And the
It's very familiar.
the arguments that she uses rang so
Familiar.
true to what I hear
Yeah.
when I'm dealing with trans issues.
Sure.
In my personal life, because one of the first things she says is like, think about mutants ravaging your daughter.
Yeah.
Like, and it
Oh,
always comes
yeah.
back to, A, it always comes back to save the kids, but B, it always comes back to protecting women. And that's exactly what's going on right now with us trans women, Josie, is, it's like, well, we're not
Yep.
safe to be in the bathroom around cis
Yep.
people.
Around cis people. Yeah, we could hurt them, we'll rape them,
You
whatever.
know what
Yeah.
I do in the bathroom? I go
I
to the
go to the
bathroom and then
bathroom.
I wash my hands, which
Yeah, and
is
I'm in a
better than a
stall.
portion of the population, let's be honest.
Right, and I'm
But,
in a stall that's closed. You can't see me. Who gives a shit? But you're
mhm.
right. That's Cassie is presenting the gender critical argument about the mutant critical, gene critical. How about GC, the gene critical argument?
Please, Gene starts with a J. Gene starts with a J.
So what, gene critical?
No, no, I'm I'm just
A GIF, GIF.
because there's a character named Gene in the comic.
There is
Anyway,
okay. I couldn't tell if you're making a GIF, GIF joke
it
or
was a stupid joke. It was a stupid joke.
I loved it anyway. But the point is, yes, it is that exact logic. And also it's interesting, the mutant metaphor, it doesn't work as well for race because the idea of the mutation is that it manifests at puberty. Not always, but like the general gist of the X gene in this fictional universe is when you hit puberty, it manifests. That's not true of race. That's not true of a lot of things. But it is true for a lot of people. Not everyone. There are definitely prepubescent trans people all the time, and they're often the topic of a lot of debate. But like to have the metaphor be intertwined with I am growing up, I'm figuring out who I am, my body is changing. It works really well in a trans metaphor, which is probably not surprising given that Grant, although they were not out as non-binary at the time, had been like taking photos in women's clothing, like, doing photo shoots like that, and like were not gender non-conforming. So I wouldn't be surprised if that element is there and it works. So I like that theory.
Well, but it also, again, and I'll have more to say about Cassie and Dr. Trask.
God, yeah.
I believe it's called Mr. Trask, but he is a dentist, so I don't know, maybe he doesn't deserve the level of respect I'm granting him.
Dr.
But
Trask, DDS, yeah.
yeah, yeah. Dentists are doctors. Dentists are an important part of our
No, 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 no,
society.
no. I want to go on record. I'm an anti-dentite. Like the dentist cartel is a very bad thing. And so I don't know if Grant knew that because Grant comes from the UK where they have socialized medicine, but it's very funny that it's a dentist doing this because in the United States, there's a reason why you have separate dental insurance. Dentists have a really good
That's
cartel
right.
going.
That's right.
And dentists overcharge, dentists have their own scheme. So I kind of love that it's a dentist in particular, somebody who's like from this profession that has figured out how to say fuck you, I got mine.
Anyway,
Sorry, we can take out the
no, no, no.
anti-dentism
I
later,
mean,
but yes.
I don't know. We can keep it. It's up to you. You said it, not me.
We'll talk about it later. I said it, not you. Keep going.
But what I think matters even more than the puberty element of the X gene is the fact that you don't know when it's going to arrive, right? Two white
Mm,
people are never going to give birth to a black person. You're
right.
never going to give birth to a child who's of a different race than you.
Yeah.
But the fear of your child could become trans is something that any race can feel. So it's a better connection to the mutant, like for the mutant metaphor, the queerness element, than the race element, because again, there's never going to be a situation where it's like you don't know, right? You don't know that that
Hmm.
person is black. You would never have guessed that person could
I mean,
become
there's
black.
passing, but like in concept, the idea is it's supposed to be a visual signifier race. Like it's stupid and it doesn't exist. But if you're using race as the metaphor, there has to be a visual signifier.
Right.
And what's amazing about the X-Men is like it's often used as a racial metaphor, but the visual signifier, but oftentimes these people don't have any visual signifiers.
And that's why I think it works better for queerness. And you're right, obviously, there are like light-skinned people and things like that. Like I understand, but it
We're
certainly is
Jews. We're passing for white right now. But
right
like
now.
right now, for now. But I want to get at something about the trans metaphor because this is the part that I think will blow our listeners' minds if they've already read New X-Men. And you really blew my mind. Cassie or Charles is trans. Like, we'll spoiler that. I don't care about spoilering things on this pod because so much happens.
This comic is 24 years old.
Comic is 24 years old, and there are things that happen later that you really have to backwards put in order to assess the whole run because there are a lot of red herrings and misdirections. And I think it's important to note that later in this run, it is established that Cassandra Nova is a genetically identical twin of Charles Xavier. Now, I may not be that much of a science genius, but that would heavily imply they came out with the same chromosomes and the same whatever. And so one of them has changed their gender. One of them has. One of them is no longer what they were assigned at birth. That's my guess, and that's what you were saying. And I think it makes it really interesting. Because here's the thing, Grant knows that. Grant wouldn't have said they could have just said, like, these are two fraternal twins, but they're genetically identical twins, and that's important.
And let me just start by saying, I think we all know which one is trans because Josie, I don't know about you, but like 30% of the trans girls I know are named Cassandra.
Yeah, no, there's so many Cassies.
I'm kidding, but there are a lot of Cassies in our community.
You joke, but it would make much more sense for Cassie to be trans. I mean, look, just from the fact that, like, yes, there's magic and all kinds of things in the Marvel Universe, but Charles has sired too many children.
We've also seen more flashbacks of him as a child.
Right. And Cassie, my guess is Cassie was assigned male at birth and has chosen to live as a woman and is a woman. And that is really fucking interesting.
Which also
evil Tran Cassandra Nova being written, like, evil bald Tran Cassandra Nova. Very interesting for Grant Morrison to invent this character. No?
I mean, Cassandra Nova has breasts, but Cassandra Nova is gender nonconforming. Like,
very gender nonconforming and bald, and in many ways, I always say that, like, the villain of the story is usually the author's self-insert because even if you don't think they are, because the villain has to be the one that tortures the protagonists, and that's what you're doing. You're torturing the protagonist as the author. And it's really interesting that Grant Morrison, chose to have as this almost godlike character, Cassandra Nova, someone that resembles them in interesting ways. And I really respect that because I think any author who does not take on the responsibility of the fact that they are torturing characters that people really love and doesn't reckon with what that means is doing a disservice to superhero comics. Now, maybe superhero comics are worthy of doing a disservice to, but if you like them, as I do, that's an important element, I think.
And I do just want to wrap up what we were saying about the mutant metaphor, though.
Yes, please.
Where I think the mutant metaphor falls apart is in two places, right? One is that, quite frankly, maybe not the level of hate that the mutants get, but I understand why the governments of the world are afraid of the mutants.
And of Genosha, of a nation of them.
But forgetting even like the nation state element of it, like, our hero Cyclops, if his glasses fall off, he blows up a building.
Right.
And that is scarier than me, who, if my glasses fall off, I can't see. The fact of the matter is there is nothing to be afraid of with trans people outside of the Great Replacement theory. Whereas with X-Men, it's like, yeah, I don't know. Like, how many times
they're walking bombs.
Yeah. So it doesn't quite work in that regard. But the big thing that gets me, and we will talk about with the Morrison run, especially as we get into some of the later stuff, but is that the mutant metaphor is a metaphor. And writers love to use it for anything. We talked about how they often use it for race. We talked about how they often use it for queerness. And this gives writers a pass so often to feel like they're
writers.
white male writers, and with white male editors, because it's
Yeah.
also the editors who decide what shows up in print, it gives them the excuse to write stories that are exclusively about conventionally attractive, cisgender, heterosexual white people, and feel like they're telling a story about something important. And for all of Grant's many, many positive traits, this is a story about conventionally attractive cis-het white people on an adventure.
Unless you count Beast's brief gayness, which I count as canonical, but whatever.
We're gonna get into that.
We'll get into that
with our special guest, Trish.
That's right, Trish.
Yeah, we're gonna have her on.
Trish Tilby.
Thank you. I couldn't remember her last name. I had a moment.
Trish Tilby, the famous television journalist. Yes, we will definitely have her on.
Yeah, Trish Tilby. Expect her. But again, Cyclops, Emma, Jean, and Logan are all cis-het. Again, presumably cis-het, and we can.
Yeah, they're hot, and
there's so many trans headcanons for all of them, and queer headcanons.
I know, but like.
Narratively, they are cis-het.
Yeah, narratively, and they certainly pass for that. Even if they are secretly bisexual or trans in their hearts, you can sell this comic to a homophobe. You can sell this comic to a racist, and they will still enjoy it.
And Beast doesn't pass as human, but not in a way that anyone in the real world doesn't pass as human. Right?
He's... Before we go any further, I want to say, when I was reading this comic as a kid, as a teen, the person I related most to was both Scott and Jean, because I was kind of both of them. I was both sides of that relationship. Weirdly, now that I have transitioned, Beast is my number one self-ID character while I'm reading this book. Because Beast has transed. That's the thing. Like, the opening with this character is that there's a secondary mutation that's happened. And Beast is happy about it. Beast is like relearning how to do things with this new, more feline body. But like, you see how happy Beast is that this exciting new thing happened with his body. And then, spoiler alert, you get Cassandra Nova inside Charles Xavier's body at the end, in Danger Rooms, at the end of this little chunk, saying, "You're a freak. You're disgusting. This secondary mutation that happened to you, this change that happened to you, it made you even more disgusting than you already were, and you were already disgusting." And that's how it feels to be talked to by the Trump administration or any fascist right now if you're trans.
And you know what I blew your mind with regards to that scene in Danger Rooms is the bizarre, there's no way Grant could have known this element where Cassandra Nova is lording it over Beast that he needs to use a litter box. How much
and fights him in the litter box.
Mm-hmm. And how much do we hear today about, like, you wouldn't believe what the kids are doing.
What those kids are doing.
They have litter boxes in schools.
Yeah, I know.
And again,
I'm not holding back from all the rage, but yes.
There's no way Grant could have known this unless we believe that chaos magic is real.
Which Grant does, so fair.
So maybe Grant had a vision of 2025 and that's all they saw. But the fact is, it felt so weird to me after,
Yes, it felt really,
diving through news articles about, like, are kids using litter boxes in schools? That Beast is using a litter box in school. Beast is being made fun of. Like, but the thing about Beast is, Beast 100%, I'm excited to read more about Beast in this run. Like, keep reading. Yeah. Because at this point, I have only read this run, or this arc. I'm going to be speeding up my reread because we might be recording out of order. A little peek behind the curtain.
Yeah.
But right now I've only read that, and I don't remember how I felt about Beast when I read this the first time. Scott has always been my my sort of self-insert character, and I mentioned that on the first episode that he really meant a lot to me. But I'm excited to read more because again, you do have Beast coded as trans in this way and coded as queer and even explicitly queer in a way that we'll get to when we get to that arc. But the fact is, again, Beast is not real world diversity, right? Like it's
No.
metaphorical. And that lets all of these reactionary jerks online be like, X-Men was never woke. X-Men isn't woke.
Right.
X-Men isn't woke because they see and it's like, yeah, Logan's
On a
a
surface level, it's not. On a surface level, it's not as woke as it actually is on a subtextual level, and that's a problem.
and it lets writers get away with that. And
Yeah.
it means that we don't have the representation that we need even in newer stuff. Like again, this is 2001. Obviously, media understanding was very different in 2001. I'm not saying that made it right, but like I wouldn't have expected a canonically trans character in something written in 2001. I know what was on the table. I know what we were dealing with. Was Will
Sure.
and Grace on the air yet?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
But the point is, I know Will and Grace isn't about trans people, but you know what I mean.
No, 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 no.
But
No, I get it. I get it.
but the point is, we see this now, and this is where I lose patience with the mutant metaphor and get into Twitter fights over Krakoa, where it's like you want this to be about this like minority group who's finally gotten power in the world, but you're not actually telling a story about minority groups that I recognize. And that breaks my heart as a trans
Oh,
person.
Becca. Keep going, but I have a rebuttal to that. Keep going. Keep
Well,
going. I
Krakoa,
want I
well,
want to hear I
Krakoa
want to
is
hear the rest of your
well,
argument.
no. I mean, the rebuttal is Krakoa is evil, and it's good that it's white people. But my
No, no, keep going. Keep going. Yeah.
but and it you don't see people of different races, and you don't. So what you're seeing is a flawed utopia. And when the Krakoa books were about a flawed utopia, which is what Hoxpox was, I
Yes.
loved it because I was
Yeah.
sitting there and I was like, this is not a utopia. But Hoxpox sold well, so
So we had to have the Hellfire Gala and
Marvel had to keep going with it, and
yeah.
the X-Men had to keep being portrayed as the good guys, and they had
Yeah.
to keep having fun galas, and we had to be informed that the drug trade was good actually, and we had to, and we had to colonize Mars, and years of these books where they are not meeting their comeuppance for this.
Yeah.
We are not seeing
There's
the.
no punishment. There's punishment in Hoxpox in the predictions of the future.
Mm-hmm.
But like Hoxpox, I always say is just a miniseries. You don't read the rest of it.
Well, and that's what I wound up doing, and that's why I stopped reading X-Men. So my
Yeah.
point is, and like you don't
Yes.
actually disagree with what I'm saying about like Krakoa isn't about actual minorities, is that works when it is a flawed utopia, but the X books that followed continued to treat it as a utopia. And the fans
Yes.
online continued to literally tell me, Krakoa is a queer utopia. And I'm like, Krakoa is not a queer utopia. There's 6 queer characters. I have more queer people in my house on Thanksgiving. Like, it's
Mhm.
ridiculous. Anyway, I'm getting ahead of
Let
myself.
me let me jump in. That was not my rebuttal, actually. It's interesting that you thought that. My rebuttal is, and this is something I've been waiting to say throughout this episode, is I think in 2025, there are only two very flawed but effective ways the mutant metaphor works. One is for transness, and one is for Jewishness. And I hate to frickin' say that, and I wouldn't have said that on a podcast 10 years ago or even 5 years ago. But right now, you were talking about how, what minority group does this? None. Well, there's a very small minority of humans that we are a part of that are called Jews. And what I find fascinating about the X-Men is that it's a racial metaphor more, or a ethnic, whatever, metaphor about Jews more than about more visually distinct kinds of people who get or are bigoted against, because the threat is always like, oh, it's insidious. They could be anywhere.
Ah, that's
And
true.
they have power. And what's interesting about this is, when do the X-Men emerge? In the early 1960s. What's happening in the early 1960s? American Jews, like Stan Lee and Jack Kirby, are starting to do very well for themselves. And for the first fucking time ever, these people are not facing open anti-Semitism because the Christian world feels so guilty about the Holocaust, which is still just starting to be discussed. So you have this kind of brief moment, not brief moment, but long moment in lived time, brief moment in the millennia, where Jews suddenly have power. And then suddenly they have their own nation state on top of everything else. And I really do think this works as a very delicate and troubling metaphor for Jewishness, because I'm not saying being a Jew gives you power. That would be anti-Semitic for me to say. That said, Jews have a nation state that is explicitly, for Jews, and they have a military, and that's Jewish power.
I did get a super long prehensile tongue at my bat mitzvah. But anyway, continue.
No, I'm just saying that, we're going to keep having to talk about Krakoa because we talk about Genosha. These are the two, Krakoa and Genosha are these two things that exist in dialogue within the concept of the X-Men and Marvel Comics. Because Genosha is this example of a nation state of mutants that gets completely wiped out. And it's portrayed as basically they were innocent victims. And then you get Krakoa, where mutants form their own nation state and planet, too, on top of that.
Yeah, we get the graphs and charts because Hickman wrote it.
Because it's Hickman, yeah. Wrote and designed it. And there, if handled well, and in Hoxpox it was handled well, it's not a good idea. And they are not innocent victims. And I think having problematic victims of bigotry who have power but should not be persecuted against on the basis of the existence of their genes or whoever they are, their birth. It's a tough question that I think this run really tries, and in some ways succeeds, and in a lot of ways fails to grapple with. But anyway, in long sum, I think what we're going to be looking at least I think, as we go through these issues, is we're both Jewish, we're both trans, and we're both going to be looking at it through those two lenses. I'm happy to let you sort of take the lead on the trans stuff, because I will fall on my sword and be the controversial one for the Jewish stuff.
Yeah,
I will.
There's obviously a lot of controversy.
There's a lot of controversy, and I pick my words carefully. I am not going to fly off the handle about it, but it is something.
You are the expert on navigating that particular minefield.
Well, thank you. But and it's a minefield right now, because anyone who reads this comic in 2025 is going to think of Gaza. It's not a perfect metaphor for Gaza.
Sure isn't.
At all. Sure isn't. Don't think of it that way. But when it comes to the pure aesthetic and visceral and libidinal experience of reading X-Men number 115, which concludes with the genocide, and then 116, where you see the ruins of Genosha, in 2025, it's impossible not to think of it. Because comics are a visual medium as much as they are a written medium, and the visuals of a place that has been ravaged by technological death, by advanced weaponry and blighted murder, is something that really, really hits hard in 2025.
Yeah.
But I caution people against using it as a direct metaphor, because this is a fictional story, and it's not just a fictional story. It's a fictional story where Genosha was full of people who were walking atom bombs. Was Gaza full of people who were walking atom bombs? There are a lot of people who think so, and those people are racist.
I was about to say, but no.
But no, those are the racists. That's why it's interesting.
No one in Gaza is literally a teenage warhead, who of course is the only one we meet.
Yeah, Negasonic teenage warhead.
We meet in Genosha.
Right. That's. I really think that it's something that we will not come to a conclusion about, but like all good Jewish questions, we'll just never get an answer, just better questions. And this book does not have answers to the Jewish question or the Palestinian question or any of that, but it does make you feel and think things.
Yeah, and I will also say, again, Krakoa, at its best, in Hoxpox, deals with that similar vibe of, I love the sort of Jewish metaphor that you're making here, because again, I think it's the first or second issue. Where does Magneto build a
Oh, it's the first
port?
issue. I will
Yeah.
never forget where I was when I read that one too. He looks behind him at the diplomats while you can see the dome, or you can see you can see the Dome of the Rock,
Hmm.
and you can see the rest of Jerusalem. He's looking backwards and he says, "You have new gods now."
Yeah. So when
And
it's
that's a Jew.
when it's done right, absolutely. The question
Yes.
is just again what I was getting at with the mutant metaphor stuff, and we should I mean we are talking about this issue. I was about to say we should get back to this issue, but we are.
We don't have to recap it. We're
Yeah.
talking about what we thought of it and what it made us feel. So go on.
But what I feel like the mutant metaphor does is it gives less deft writers an excuse to tell stories about white people is
Yeah,
basically
yeah,
what I'm
no,
saying. Whereas
completely agree.
whereas I think Hoxpox and New X-Men 114, 115, 116, 117, the comics we're talking about today, are
Hmm.
there's my teacher vibes back.
Yeah, yeah,
I
yeah.
think these comics are written with a level of intentionality that you do not always see in other X-Men adventures.
No,
And I can say that having read
no.
a lot of X-Men adventures. I can say that when Psylocke goes into her mind space and gets a demon bear, that has less intentionality than this. And I don't want to insult that writer. I just mean like I don't even remember who wrote that run. But I just mean like
Nor do I.
there's less of an intentional metaphor being woven than I feel like there is with New X-Men
I completely agree. Grant is doing their best, and they are gender nonconforming. So that part of the metaphor works well. In the pitch
which I
document,
didn't know. It's worth
no,
noting.
none of us
Well,
knew
but
this at
also
the
like
time.
also like you read it in 2001. You probably did not understand the concept of like
No, I had no
non-bind. No,
clue.
no offense, but like
No, I'd never heard of it. It was not on the parlance.
I read this in 2014.
Yeah,
I literally had non-binary friends at the time. I
yeah,
mean,
yeah, yeah.
I was still identifying as a cisgender heterosexual man at the time, which is silly in hindsight. I had a beard, Josie. Can you believe it? A
I
beard.
had a beard.
What were
Someday
we doing?
we
But
should have a funeral for our beards sometime.
but the point is
You go
like
get
I wish I had known when reading this that Grant was
non-binary.
non-binary. And I didn't even know that Grant was non-conforming because this was the
Yeah, well,
first Grant Morrison thing I read. I had not read about Grant Morrison before diving into this.
oh, I'm sorry. That went over my head for a second. This is the first thing of anything by Grant Morrison that you read. Very interesting.
Yeah.
I'm sure that's true for a lot of people, especially people who
Oh, it's
own.
gotta be. This comic sold like gangbusters.
Yeah, but also, especially if you were only a Marvel head. I've been reading them for a few years on Justice League. My best friend from childhood, who is now also a trans girl, was a huge DC fan. I was a big Marvel fan. We would trade information and comics. And she really got me into Justice League. So I read all of Grant Morrison's run on JLA. And so when this happened, I was very familiar with, and I'd read like Arkham Asylum, their graphic novel about Batman.
Oh, I
So
read that before this.
a lot of people have, and I think even Grant would tell you, Arkham Asylum, A Serious House on Serious Earth, way too pretentious. Great Dave McKean art, not well written.
That
But
lettering, it's all about that lettering. What is that? Gaspar
yeah.
Saladino did the lettering,
Was
I
that it?
believe.
Yeah, it's well, we don't have to get into that. But Grant Morrison, I was already somewhat familiar with their dance on the edge of perversion. Like Grant came up with Mark Miller, the other Scottish enfant terrible of the late 90s into the early 2000s, and Miller loved crossing the line. Morrison always loved skirting the line and occasionally just dipping their toe across it just to really fuck you up in the soul. But like it feels restrained and controlled in this way. Like the genocide, and then what's somehow even more or equally upsetting, I should say, which is in Danger Rooms, the part where Cassie and Charles's body beats the shit out of Henry McCoy's brain and then makes this very nice young mutant Barnell Bohusk, who's been mentored by Beast, telekinetically makes him beat the shit out of Beast with a baseball bat. It's the genocide and that moment both have to happen. They both have to happen because some people are going to be more affected by the gigantic number of 16 million dead mutants. Some people are going to be moved more by, oh my God, one of my favorite characters just got humiliated and hurt in the most terrible way I can imagine. And most importantly, hopefully, you'll be seeing that both of these things are the same thing. Insofar as the roots of genocide are always at like a level of personal disgust and a level of dehumanization.
I was just about to say,
always
the personal is political, the political is personal. It's a
Yeah,
cliche, but it's
like if it
you
yeah,
can't separate the politics from the personal. You just
no,
can't.
and if you just
and anyone who's asking you to is just means I want you to shut up is what they mean.
Right. But like exactly, like the death of 16 million mutants on Genosha hits hard. And in fact, the first person we see really reacting to it when they're on Genosha is Beast.
Mm-hmm.
Beast is holding a skull.
And he's got that gallows humor, which
is
also very Jewish.
very Jewish, because I'm afraid your dating days are over, my friend, talking to this skeleton that he finds. And it's a joke. It's a dark joke, but it's a very Jewish joke in that, like, he's talking to this dead soul who will probably never be identified. It's very compassionate and beautiful in its way, making a joke for someone who'll never hear it. And then to have in the next issue, Cassie, who represents, I'm not going to allow for her representing the cosmic concept of opposites, but I'll have to figure out what she represents for me at some point.
We haven't introduced that idea to the comic yet. That comes once the Shi'ar get
involved. That comes much later,
yeah.
but Cassie as the force of something, at least here the force of depression brain, and the force of, like, if there's one thing that Grant Morrison knows how to write, they know how to write depression brain as manifested in a supervillain or a predicament that a superhero is in.
A lot of that in Doom Patrol too, which I am very familiar with. A lot of that in Doom
Patrol, very much. Yeah, like how many of us who have read New X-Men have referred to us going to our black bug room? Like I have been to the black bug room many a time.
We've all got a black bug room, Josie.
We've all got a black bug room.
And this is yours.
This podcast is mine. No, it's not.
No. That's the literal line.
I know that's the line. I was just saying that, like, this is yours, and
but absolutely, and
but like it's depression brain. They are really good at figuring out the logic, the bad logic, articulating the bad logic that starts playing in your head when you hate yourself, or when you are made to hate yourself by someone who wants you to hate yourself.
Anyway,
it's really upsetting.
And I think
it's really upsetting to read.
I think what makes this so upsetting, for the record, and just to talk a little bit about the manifesto again,
Please.
Grant mentioned in the manifesto that they didn't want to think of this as being about superheroes. And I think that that's something that they do a really great job of in these 3 issues, is making it clear, making you like and care about these characters as people, even in just a short amount of time, with their powers 100% coming second. I mean, quite frankly, we don't necessarily, I feel like if you haven't read X-Men comics before this, you come out of this not knowing what Beast and Emma's powers are.
Yeah.
It's just not said.
No, it's not. Like, you get some more of that later. You get some explanation of that later. But here, no, if you're coming in cold, you're like, okay, there's a guy who looks like a cat. And here's this lady who I guess can turn into a diamond, but she didn't know that. I don't know what her powers are.
Yeah, what were her powers before the diamond?
Like, it's sort of implied that she's a psychic because she walks into the classroom and is like, today we're going to invade the minds of various celebrities, and the first that can tell me the horrible truth about Tom and Nicole gets a gold star, which is very funny and interesting now.
I was going to say, I wonder if she knew
not
the horrible...
talking about that.
Yeah.
We've got enough. We've opened ourselves up to enough liability as it is, but that was a very funny line to read now.
Cut me saying I'm not sure if she knew. But
anyway.
But it is just very character first. And let me just say, I adore Emma in this. Emma,
Oh, she's great.
and I love her even more now. Now that I'm a woman, I feel very differently about Emma than I used to. And I should just say,
Wait, tell me more. I want you to say what you're going to say, but that's very interesting. Get back to that.
what it really comes down to is like, I like Emma a lot, especially, well, first of all, let me be clear. Who's writing Emma matters more than
Oh, it
potentially
matters more
who's
than the
writing
character.
anyone.
Yes, it has to be someone who can do that.
I always loved Emma Frost. She was always one of my favorites because one of my favorite runs is the shoot, what's
Claremont? Is it Claremont?
it's not Claremont. I'm the only one in the world who likes this run as much as I do. But the Schism era where
Wow,
where
Schism.
Cyclops has his own strike force. Who wrote that?
Was that
It is
Bendis or was
Bendis. It is
that?
Bendis.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Thank you. I just was having a moment.
No, it's fine. It's fine. It's fine.
And Emma is so good in that run too, for what it's worth.
Yeah, Bendis.
But
Bendis. I was shocked that Bendis knew how to write Emma. Like genuinely shocked. I was like,
there's ups and downs to Schism. Don't get me wrong,
sure,
but
sure, but like he gave her good lines, and I was like, I've interviewed Brian Michael Bendis. This is about as like dudely a dude as you can imagine, but he gave some very good lines to her.
the point is like
Yes.
I love when Emma is sort of like at the end of the day, she's portrayed as being very self-centered, but what she cares about most is her students. And Morrison does that better than anyone.
Well, that's the introduction of the character into New X-Men, is
Mhm.
her striding into a classroom being, Cameron Diaz in Bad Teacher.
Which is a far cry from like the other times we've seen her as a teacher, like in Claremont's Firestar miniseries.
Right.
Claremont wrote Firestar, right?
Did Claremont write Firestar? Well, we're just going to warn you. This is not Jay and Miles Explain the X-Men. This is not, a podcast where we have an encyclopedic knowledge. We are enthusiasts with a lot of knowledge.
Anyway,
So
Emma
forgive us.
blows up a horse in that.
Emma blows up a horse. How about that?
Yeah, but anyway, the point is, what I think the difference between 2025 Becca and 2014 Becca is, besides the fact that and my hair was a buzz cut, but besides that, I felt very uncomfortable with liking female characters because it made me feel like I was a creep. I was like, surely I am only liking Emma because her tits are out.
Are out, yes. And she's very sexualized, yeah.
In my conscious brain, I was like, I really think she's really funny, and I like how much she cares, but she doesn't want people to know that she cares. But then my anxiety brain would be like, and you're a pervert. And the thing about 2025, Becca, is first of all, now I understand that I like female characters because I see myself in them.
Yeah, sure.
And second of all, now I am fine with being a pervert because
society has regarded you as a pervert by your very existence.
right. So I'm like, you know what? Whatever. So I'm like, yeah, I like that Emma Frost is really hot. I do like that. Although, frankly, this outfit she wears in this run is just too ridiculous that I just worry about her the whole time.
It's somehow even more ridiculous in the Schism era, if I recall correctly.
Sure is. I have an action figure of it in my drawer.
Yeah, it was really amazing. Like, this outfit in New X-Men, you're like, how's that staying on? And then Chris Bachalo does a remix for the Schism era, and you're like, okay, come on. Be serious. Are you bringing out the action? Yeah, like...
Folks at home can't see,
at
but
least in the original, in the new X-Men one, there's kind of an X shape to keep something on. This is just an open jacket that is somehow staying on her boobs.
Yeah.
Anyway, we're getting very far afield.
The point is,
yeah, you say what you're going to say because I want to say how I felt about Emma. Yeah,
I'm very excited to read this now that I'm fully past all compunctions. Is that the right word? Compunctions? No.
Sure. I'm a writer, but I don't know what most words mean. I'm generally
yeah, I'm an English teacher. Hang-ups. I'm fully past all the hang-ups that I have about liking a female character because I'm like,
and specifically Emma. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I just want to jump in and say I always loved Emma. I was afraid to say how much I liked Emma, probably for the same reason you did. But what's so interesting to me about Emma, and this run, to spoiler something that happens much later, more or less establishes that she's one of those cis women who's so high femme, so self-constructed, and so alienated from her origins that she might as well be an honorary trans girl.
Yeah.
Like, I'm not going to give her the stolen valor, but there's a reason trans girls really like her, because come to find out, she didn't always look like that. She didn't always talk like that.
Yeah,
She did vocal training, bitches.
she's
She's from Massachusetts. She is not English. And like she created this identity for herself, and it's beautiful.
yeah.
It's really hot, and she uses that in the way that she wants. It's a very trans femme relatable type approach to this character.
So I'm really excited to read more with these characters in this run.
Me too.
Not that I haven't
Me
read this
too.
before, but like I'm curious to experience it again from a different angle.
No, and this one ends, these four issues end in a moment that I think really resonates in 2025 in a way we haven't talked about for any of these things, which is it's Cassie in Charles's body. She's about to get beamed up to the Shi'ar mothership to destroy the universe. And she says in Charles's voice, imagine the responsibility of all that destructive potential, the power to crack the firmament and extinguish suns. Imagine that in the wrong hands. And what is that if not American empire?
Yeah.
What is that if not what the situation we're in right now? We created something that is now in the wrong hands. And I think that this is going to be a very thrilling reread because Morrison didn't know what was coming, and yet I always think of what they said about Final Crisis, which was that Final Crisis was their emotional diary of the Bush years, which is a great phrase. I have written so many things that are my emotional diary of some period that is not a diary, it's just an article or whatever, or a piece of fiction. And this feels like an emotional diary of what was the future and is now the present. And I love going on this journey with you, Becca. So I think this is a good place to wrap it up, maybe. Do you have other points you want to make about E is for Extinction and Danger Rooms?
No, I mean, I missed my point to say extremely something we see with trans people that Dr. Trask also fetishizes the mutants and apparently like loves mutant porn.
Yep.
But
That's very important to note. The Alex Jones type problem. Yes, exactly.
yeah, but I kind of missed the point to say that, but I guess I don't know, I'll throw that on there.
No, that's good. That's good. I also want to point out that the original proposal, we didn't talk about this, it's not super relevant, but I find it fascinating. We'll post the proposal on the website so people can read it if they want. But the original opening page, I know we're ending the episode by talking about the first page, but the first page in the final version is this famous kind of dig at Chris Claremont and Marvel, where it has the first page is just Wolverine clawing at an old school Sentinel while Cyclops sort of bored shoots a laser beam at it. And Cyclops says, Wolverine, you can probably stop doing that now. The idea being everything in X-Men for the past 40 years or whatever, 20 years has sucked. So you could probably stop worrying about it. We're going to do something new. So that's what was printed. But the original opening page, and I can see why they didn't do it, was just a splash page of Charles Xavier with a gun to his head saying, get out of my head or I shoot. And that is, my guess that was, even for Bill Jemas era Marvel, that was a bridge too far. But I kind of respect it. It would have gotten my attention, but at the same time, you don't want to encourage suicide.
We see that later in the issue, but it's better because we see it, like, I can see it being
too much as a splash page on the first
less dangerous because we know the context, you know?
And if this pod ends up being as good as I think it will be, I would like for us at the end to do an episode about the other E is for Extinction, which was the satire of this series of New X-Men that Chris Burnham co-wrote for Secret Wars. And it's fascinating because I was just rereading it. The first page is the page that was in the proposal.
You also have the other satire of this in Secret Wars.
Which one?
X-Men 94, which has
92.
No.
92.
No.
Oh.
That was X-Men 94 because it took place after X-Men 92 had ended.
The series for War Zones,
Hmm.
the spin-off thing was X-Men 92.
Okay, it was called 92.
That was the debut of X-Men 92. It then continued, like some of the Warzone series, it then continued afterward and they did more of it. But it was originally X-Men 92 and it was part of Secret Wars and yes, X-Men 92 introduced Cassie into this sort of
Hmm. But again,
90s cartoon content.
as a like
Standards and practices
as a
person
like
saying,
omniscient censor is like how they made her godlike.
very interesting. Okay, let's get through this arc. I mean, through this whole run, and then maybe we can look at the parodies. But all I was trying to say was, mad respect to Chris Burnham for taking that shocking first splash page from the proposal and actually executing it many years later. So, thank you so much, everyone. Let's close out with our little tags of where we were can be found. Becca, where can people find you?
Right, so I'm on Blue Sky at Tall Girl Petunia, all one word. You can also find my work on the website toughpigs.com, where I write about the Muppets
Mm-hmm.
usually and queerness. Also, my upcoming, maybe out already, maybe not, podcast, A Prairie Dawn Companion, which you can actually, I should specify, is not on its own podcast feed. You can find it on the Muppet Fan Podcasts from toughpigs.com feed. We'll post a link.
Great. And you can find me, Josephine Riesman, at my website, which is Josie, Josie, dot zone, like the Twilight Zone. And you can also find me on Blue Sky at that same handle, josie.zone. And yeah, you can also find our show page, which I built at herecomestomorrow.net. And we should have the Blue Sky handle, herecomestomorrow.net. As of this recording, for some reason, there's a technical error and it's not working. But by the time you hear this, we should have it fixed. So until next time, don't forget to like and subscribe, tell your friends, and remember, burn away what doesn't work. You want to say it together?
No, that's your thing.
That's my thing. Okay, great.
Have a good
We've
one,
established the
Josie.
precedent. I'm sorry for the pause there, then, everybody. From now on, I'll just say it with more enthusiasm right away. Burn away what doesn't work.
Have a good one.
Thanks, everybody.